It's good to be back.
It's great to be back.
It's fantastic. I was reflecting, as I often do, yesterday about how we have different stages in life.
17-30 dichotomy.
Yeah, exactly where I was headed. Me being a 30-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times what I think about is the friends that I have who are 17-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
bringing them into the world of being 30.
Mm-hmm.
So that can have more full and rich fellowship, because it can be difficult sometimes if the guy who's 30 years old wants to do stuff and the guys who are 17 years old just want to do 17-year-old stuff, which is totally fine and normal. It's just a different pace.
It's being the teenager who's needing to play at the kids' table.
Yeah,
Bit rough.
it can be a bit rough. And so, just in that regard, end up thinking about and asking questions towards the ends of like trying to get your friends married,
Mm-hmm.
which is, of course, the subtext of what we're talking about. Um, Trying to help other guys get married. And one of the things I've learned in meddling in many of my friends' lives in this very productive manner is that a lot of guys prefer different things, but there's also some universal truths about what you should do, what you should be looking for, not looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so, just in case anyone doesn't know, Yasukeh is a 17-year-old.
Yeah, I am fresh-blooded 17.
He's a very sensitive young man.
Yes, I'm incredibly sensitive.
And so we need to bring him into the world of the 30-year-olds. It's a really important thing.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the conversation topics kind of we hit on a lot is like, well, I have this friend, or I know these people, and like you should check out these people. And the kinds of things to look for aren't always readily apparent when you're not necessarily looking yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So a thought I had was kind of going over, maybe give you insight into both perspectives, from the hunting perspective, absolute predator, as some people have encouraged you to be,
Yeah.
versus the caught the prey status
Mm-hmm.
of me, in terms of like what are really, really good values to look for in a wife. And I think the most refreshing thing for me is hearing your kind of opinion on that outside in, looking at a lot of other different marriages and kind of being like, this type of marriage usually has this type of woman.
Mm-hmm.
Ergo, filter the searches, change the parameters. So would you please share with me that whole perspective? Because it's a really awesome perspective, I think.
So I'm going to touch on something you said, and then I'm going to ask you to elaborate on what exactly are you looking for me. But touching on something that you said about the idea of being the 30-year-old trying to get 17-year-olds into your circle, is that you, as a 30-year-old, are often going to have friends who are similar to you, who probably have a somewhat similar set of values and probably are looking for the same type of people. So you, when you are the 30-year-old, you are not currently on the market. You're not currently looking for things. So that opens up a lot of circles for you to
It's
where people are willing to accept you in, and they're not going to consider, hey, is this person going to try to, be the alpha predator who's going to
right.
swoop in and do something? So in that sense, you're not a threat. And then you can look for things for your other 17-year-old friends, while also understanding that the best person to help the 17-year-olds become 30-year-olds is you as a 30-year-old, in that, one, you have more experience with being a 30-year-old, being married, and you also can have social circles that are going to be much more similar to the kind of stuff that your friends would do. Because if you enjoy somebody, you enjoy a family, you enjoy this circle of people, then it's probably going to be people that your friends would also enjoy, assuming that you have a strong bond with your friends.
Yeah, in that regard, I think it's really valid to kind of look at things from the perspective of any woman who is worth realistically pursuing to marriage is probably going to have some sophisticated and well armed guardians, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
both from a psychological perspective and from a spiritual perspective.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good sign. And so you, as a guy from the outside, are going to automatically fall under a huge degree of scrutiny
Mm-hmm.
when you are a single guy.
Mm-hmm.
When that's how you're introduced, or that's how a lot of people are like, oh, there's a single guy. always the scrutiny hammer comes down in terms of, well, do we want this person attending this event or that event? Whereas when you're a married guy, a lot of the scrutiny kind of goes away in terms of like, oh, well, I really got to guard. No, people are willing to get to know you better. So
Yeah.
yeah, in terms of kind of reconnaissance,
Mm-hmm.
have that ability to kind of go into spaces and reconnoiter the entire space and see if there's anything of value there, because people are going to let me in at a lower kind of stakes.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the elaboration of my exact question towards you,
Mm-hmm.
is your perspective on not just marriage, but kind of the idea of how to go about putting together things to look for in a woman for a potential spouse, for individuals who
So
are trying to put together, like, well, what do I even want? Where do I start with? How do I evaluate other women who may be in my area?
so I'll say a whole bunch of points, and then I'm not 100% sure on the exact thing that you're fishing for,
Okay.
because I have a lot of conceptions, a lot of evaluations that have been brought up into this. First one that I'll go into is just the idea that in any type of relationship, including any relationship in the secular, like non-Christian world, there's always a balance of masculine and feminine energy, to where when you have the soy effeminate male, they're often going to get with the more girl boss guys. It's a common thing that you'll see with, it's not going to be as important for me, but for a guy that isn't thinking about these questions whatsoever, when they get with a woman who thinks about things a little bit more, it's going to be a much more appropriate match. And going back into the whole concept of looks matching, a general concept is just the idea of, if you and your spouse look like brother and sister, not literally being brother and sister, but that would be pretty ideal. But also in the idea that having the exact same kind of status value is that you might think that, there might be some benefits to going down. Um, Oftentimes, really just not whatsoever. You would think the idea of, oh, let's say you're a 8 out of 10 guy, and you're like, if I get with, 4 out of 10 woman, then she'll be super, grateful and everything.
Right.
But then there's just often going to be the problem of insecurity and, jealousy of, like, oh, this guy is, like, too good for me. So then there could be an issue there. So in that point, it's just an idea of also just not settling, while also not having irresponsible metrics. Because another concept is just the idea that there are certain things that you can demand. You have a right to say that my partner needs to have this, and that is a perfectly acceptable thing for you to demand. Whereas if you don't have certain things, then it's not. Most obvious example is being virginity. If you've been ran through as a guy, then you don't have a right to ask for that in the same way that somebody who was chaste their entire life. And this applies to so many other things, in that it can be a nice thing for you to have a particular thing. Whereas for me, as an example, don't have as solid of a family structure as I would ideally like from my spouse. So, in that sense, when I'm coming into and talking to a family who has an amazing family structure, I don't necessarily have the right to ask for that. And if I do get it, great. But then it's also understanding that I'm playing at a deficit, that I have to provide so much more and so much more in all of these other ways. And then also kind of quell the fears of, oh, hey, we value family. And this guy doesn't have that. So does he even know what's going on? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Just on the family thing, I see a lot of guys will want to have the family thing, and when they do get married and they move into maybe kind of essentially joining their spouse's family, who is very strong, they are easily bowled over, but also they are easily kind of injured or hurt because they don't understand how family is supposed to work. So it's
Hmm.
easy for them to get offended when people say, "Well, you're supposed to be doing this thing because this is the family centric thing,"
Hmm.
and they go, "Oh, that like invades on my individual, you know, ability
Yeah,
or my
because
individual directive."
ultimately the father, the husband, should be the headship, and the decision should ultimately come down there. Obviously, with influence from other factors, you can't just be like a singular tyrant who's not taking in account what people are thinking, what people are valuing, which is the role of the tyrant and the dictator, the CEO, the
Yeah.
boss, is to understand that, uh, let's say on a work site, hey, maybe my workers are like really, really tired right now. Even though I don't think we should take a break, maybe it might be valuable to. And that's just, taking into account when you, as the single guy, go into somebody else's family and you attach super strongly there, then it can kind of usurp your responsibility and your role so that you can't actually do that. And you're already from the ground up playing second fiddle in your own life story.
Yeah. Just want to say you answered perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So you totally knew what I was asking.
Mm-hmm.
That answers my question entirely.
Okay.
So good job.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
also gives us a lot of jump off points in terms of talking about that specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I have a perspective on the family aspect of it specifically. You can liken this to when a woman will say, I just wish you would read my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Or when a guy says, just tell me what to do. And then the
Mm-hmm.
woman's just like irrationally angry at that point. It's the same concept. When you are the man, you're supposed to be the leader. You're supposed to be making a lot of these kind of decisions. But it's also incumbent on you to understand and to find out what it is people need from you without necessarily asking every single time. And this is a really difficult thing. And a lot of the gender war online is kind of based around this. Like women are so irrational because they just want me to know what they want. And then if I have to ask, then I'm the bad guy. You kind of are, especially in the modern day. There's so many distractions that it's easy for the norm to be I don't pay attention to my family. I don't pay attention to my wife. I don't pay attention to what she needs. Instead, I'm just doing my own thing. And it's up to her to bring that to me. But that's just not correct. You should, as a father, you should, as a husband, be so integrated with your family that you are picking up. Not that they never have to communicate with you, but you should be able to understand what the best move is. And if you need someone else to tell you what the best move is, then that's kind of a problem. And this ties into the family thing. In larger families, families that are established, that have maybe a clanship, they have an understanding of the structure and the way to do things. You as a man, it can be difficult for you to be strong and lead your family without continually asking other people inside that family, is this an acceptable thing? Is this an okay thing? Am I, you know, in breach of the unspoken or spoken rules in this area or that area? So it does handicap you in a way. So like what Yasuke is talking about here in terms of just if you're going to marry into that strong family, you have to do your research. You have to be willing to put in the effort to find out all the unspoken things
Mm-hmm.
without someone having to tell you. Because in the event that you have to be told things, it undermines your validity as the leader of your household. If you have to be told, especially things that seem obvious to other people, where at the
Could you
same
give an
time,
example?
yeah. So like a good example for this, like just talking about the man and wife thing, would be wife is angry and the guy is like, I don't get it. Why are you angry? And then he pushes her and pushes her for an answer, and eventually she's like, we just never go out like we used to. We never go out on dates like we used to.
Mm-hmm.
And so then the guy's like, oh, okay, well then let's go out tomorrow or whatever. In that case, now she is taking the leadership position, which is unattractive to her.
Mm-hmm.
She is saying, let's go out. And now he's just doing exactly what she directs him to do, which is not that it's attractive for her.
This is a little bit of an anecdote. We went to an event and there was a young adult single gathering that was run by a
Oh,
guy.
yes. Uh-huh.
Yes. And
I didn't participate.
he didn't participate. I participated. And it was a very San Francisco speed dating type event, which was not at all appropriate for the kind of venue. But that's just what things are. Take it as they are. And in that kind of scenario, right, in maybe that 60 seconds, whatever, if you hit it off and you're just like, oh, let's just leave this thing so we can talk more and actually build valuable connection together. Um, that would be you assuming the leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the guy who ran it said directly, hey guys, if you like a girl, you're allowed to like take her out, and then all of a sudden, like
Yeah.
now you can't do that anymore because you are not breaking the rules. You're playing by the rules, and you're playing to the sound of somebody else's drum. And so that's just a scenario that sort of undermines your ability to be the leader figure that a woman would want.
Yeah, in that same way, if you're gonna go on a date, like in the anecdote or not anecdote, but this analogy I was proposing, if you were to just go on the date, then she's gonna be unhappy the whole time because women, generally, you have to understand generalizations are what's happening. Generally, want the guy to lead, to pick things, to do things. So as a guy, you should kind of know when your wife is needing more specific attention,
Mm-hmm.
when she needs you to focus on her, and you should be managing that. And so, long before things get to her being upset with you over whatever, some random thing, you should be like, hey, different relationships require different lead times, so to speak, on this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people, they need like some day to prepare for, in my specific case, I would not have any time. Just be like, we are leaving in the next couple of hours to do this super cool thing, and I've taken care of everything. It's all done. You just have to show up. That's very, very attractive for a woman
Mm-hmm.
because her not having to do anything, just having to follow the instructions that are something she wants to do anyway,
Mm-hmm.
is very, very helpful. We talked a couple years ago. We were jokingly saying, women have a set number of decisions they can make per day,
Mm-hmm.
and if you ask them to make more than those decisions, it's just all over.
Just
It's done.
crashes out,
Yeah.
overheats, and just that like ah I don't just I don't know what to do. Ah,
Yeah.
why are you asking me so many things?
Yeah. And realistically, a lot
Yep.
of the things we talk about, these are actually for both genders, in
Mm-hmm.
the sense that like you as a man also have only so many decisions you can make in a day. It's just it's vastly more than a woman. Same with like the risk matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone has an ability for risk management, and you get above a certain threshold and you're in the masculine area,
Mm-hmm.
and below that you're in the feminine area.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just an understanding that a lot of these things do kind of transcend the genders, but they're just so vastly different that it's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
Men and women can both bench press, but you would never try to compare the bench press power of any man with like any woman. It's
Yeah,
just silly.
yeah, because if the woman is 20 pounds under than the guy, then it's actually like a really insane difference for the woman. The woman is way stronger relative to the averages and the bars and the expectations that are being set. Um, and yeah, just in that sense of it is really just about trying to understand the language of women, understanding that they're not a guy. It's the whole, Sam Hyde quote that like you shouldn't be looking for a woman who has all of the exact same opinions, beliefs, and or not necessarily beliefs, but just opinions, hobbies, worldview, temperament as you, because that doesn't exist. And if it does exist, then it's just a man with
Yeah.
Asperger's.
Yeah, totally. That's another really good point, I think, is just that not judging women by the standards for men.
Mm-hmm.
So something similar to how men can do things that for a woman would be like reputation ruining.
Mm-hmm.
Women can do things that for a man you'd be like, oh wow, he's just like dysgenic, like waste of a guy. But for a woman, it's like, no, this is totally fine
Yeah,
because both are incomplete in a way.
yeah, and that's the thing is that there is a perfect unity in the ideal man and the ideal woman to where they are sort of completing each other in that as a guy you are the rock, and then as the woman you're the wave in the ocean, to
Mm-hmm.
where it's just the rock is being steadfast and unmoving, whereas the wave can just crash and crash and crash and never push the rock, never break the rock. The rock is just going to stay there, and the wave just gets to do the wave things. And once the wave has its energy out, the lunar cycle changes so that the waves are a little bit more calm,
Mm-hmm.
then, everything's all good because the rock is still there and the water is still there.
Yeah, I have known a couple families who unfortunately had disastrous consequences from basically the analogy I'm going to propose here. But these are just actual anecdotes, but obviously I'm not going to name people, where the dad, the husband of the family, would essentially take every interaction he had with other people and run it past his wife. And this is okay for the most part. It's okay if you want to share with your wife all the different things people are saying to you. And sometimes people treat you as a man kind of poorly, and you may be able to handle it and just deal with it. And then you get home and you tell it to your wife, and she has like an emotional kind of explosion over it.
Mhm.
No, you have to this. Like, that can't stand. You can't let that person do this to you, or so on.
And when you're just like, all right, yeah, this was a thing, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Or just, you're telling things and she's going to latch on to details that maybe you didn't really care about, and say these are really important things. And in this particular family, which is one of two families that I saw this kind of same thing happen in, the wife would basically change whatever his say on something was when she was super emotional and really, really frustrated. And he would take that as, okay, this is the way that we need to move forward in our relationship with this other family or with this other person, or suitors for our daughters and things like that. And then he would take that answer back to them, which oftentimes was kind of a antagonistic move. And then there would be another interaction that he would then take back to his wife, and basically let her decide all of the relationships based on her most unhinged moments rather than her least. Whereas if you follow the metric that Yasukeh just put out, where the man is the rock and the woman is the waves, she can still have her say. She can still have moments of emotionality based on the way the world is interacting with you. And she is fine to have those. Those don't make her a bad person. The problem is when you take the lowest moments and you make those into the way that you are going to interact with other people, by simply, when your wife is having low moments, you change everything about how you're interacting with people.
Mhm.
That is what's going to make the worst come out. And people go, oh, she's like a terrible person. Well, maybe not.
Mhm.
Maybe she is, but it's unlikely. She's having these emotional reactions, which are fairly normal. But the problem comes when the man just takes the worst possible ones and makes those concrete, makes those rock solid.
Yeah, materializes them into reality, because when they're words, and when they're words in private one on one with your spouse, then it's something that isn't materializing, and it can just be there, it can just float. And then as soon as the um, most negative emotions are let out, then they can just be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's just this is always just the kind of overarching issue in modern society, is just trying to take men and women as equal roles, equal decision making power, equal in every single sense, when it's just not. And you see this even with heavily Christian families who do have at least a vague idea or an understanding of what certain roles should be, still kind of defaults to this modernist view that ultimately, just every single time you see it, it's just destructive. And this is why families are the way that they are. This is why relationships are the way that they are, to where even when staying together, it's just you don't really see that kind of unity as a singular unit that a man and a wife should be. And so, in that sense, it's just um, taking charge, not letting somebody saying that, like, you shouldn't be having your marriage set up like this. Like, you should be doing this thing. You should be doing that thing. And then just taking that stuff and then just going the easy path of just capitulating to everybody else at the detriment of your life story.
Yeah, and this kind of leads to the next point that I want to talk about, which is the more or less invented gender war that we experience. We
Mhm.
touched on it earlier in the series, lightly. I kind of want to go into this a lot more in depth in terms of evaluating both gender roles and then the supposed faults that exist, how media's influenced this and inputted it. We talked about, fathers always portrayed as stupid in media, but there is so much about like the Twitter gender war,
Mhm.
where it just seems like there's so much hatred towards each other, and it doesn't make sense. Especially when my experience has been that those things are not things that are actually super negative.
Mhm.
They're just aspects about one another.
Mhm.
And when in the proper situation with the proper outlets, they're actually really constructive and they build
Mhm.
each other up. One of those being, for instance, women. It's, said they're very sensitive.
Mhm.
And I can't remember where I read it. I think you brought it up to me that women used to get sick when just looking at a really nasty shade of orange. Um,
Okay.
they'd have like if the curtains were a really nasty shade of orange, the
Mhm.
women could just get sick and stuff. Versus everyone wants to be like, oh, women are so weak, but maybe they're just more in tune with the aesthetics than you are,
Mhm.
and maybe a curtain shouldn't be a nasty like
Yeah,
orange
yeah.
tint.
There could totally be a perfectly valid reason, and just something that is maybe not a big as of a deal for you, but there still is value and importance in sort of taking that on and understanding that different perspective that you don't have and you're kind of incapable of having because you're a man.
Yeah, exactly. And then for men, oftentimes getting accused of all kinds of things. Oh, lazy, just sit around all day, or various other things like that. But men have a tendency to sit and think on things
Hmm.
or decompress when they need to deal with an issue.
Hmm.
And women have a tendency to simply work on issues.
Hmm.
If there's something going on, they just work on it. One example is a wise couple gave me the information that if a man ever says he's not thinking about anything, it's just a lie. It's just he can't actually express what he's thinking, and he looks like he's doing nothing. And so it's easier for him to just say, "Oh, nothing."
Hmm.
When a woman's like, "Oh, what are you thinking about?" And she goes, nothing."
Hmm.
No, he's not thinking about nothing. It's just the thoughts are so abstract and so out there. He actually needs to collect them. We throw around the term like collect your thoughts,
Hmm.
but it's a real thing.
Yeah, because a thought might not be ready to put out there into the world. Whereas, there's the whole concept of I'm willing to say an idea that's 17% cooked.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason why people will have different frameworks and different thought patterns with that. And I wouldn't give 17% cooked ideas to people that aren't appropriate for that. Um, so that's why it's just most common for people to just no, not thinking about anything, not really bringing anything up. And um, yeah, just in terms of the overall, all of the dysfunction, dysgenics that are talked about in the sort of gender war is, if anything, just a direction issue in that the things that actually would solve these issues, because there are like genuine issues that are causing it, and it's not something that is completely without basis. There is some type of connection there, but it's more of um, the solutions that actually would solve these are just verboten. They're not allowed to be done. So then you are constantly talked about, hey, these are these problems that you have, but then you can't actually take the solutions for them, which is, where, like boomers very often complain about, young men are just super lazy. Like, they just like sit and play video games all day, or on day phones, and women all they do is eat hot chip and lie and charge day phones. um, but also, boomers won't ever really criticize the woman's side. um, and all of um, the problem is ultimately men not taking the responsibility and the leadership, and then sort of divvying that off, pawning that off, taking the idea of we got to be a little bit more egalitarian on things, which also will lead to situations of women kind of taking their own role, which is also just the concept of women will be more masculine when there isn't a masculine figure in their life, which makes sense as a protective mechanism. Because if you don't have a unity of, father daughter or husband wife, then you do have to take on that more masculine role. And that is just something that's going to be very common in the modern world, to where like the entire concept of therapy, like if you're it's even worse when you're a married woman
Yeah.
who is in therapy, because that should be the role of the husband. But sort of just trying to sort of take that own ownership in those roles. All of this could just be solved by just understanding that these are the roles that you should take, and these are the roles that you should take. And all of the issues are being kind of dishonest and not really able to touch that third rail topic of, oh, this is the way that things worked for infinity amount of time. It's probably a reason for that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues in terms of spaces in general, so kind of related to the therapy thing tangentially, is that traditionally you have spaces that exist as open. So this would be a space where everyone's welcome. You can think of like the gym. Pretty much everyone's welcome there, except families, but that's kind of beside the point.
Mhm.
Um, and then there are men's spaces.
Mhm.
And the reason for men's spaces is that they can retreat from the world and build each other up.
Mhm.
And in the modern day, we have an idea about women's spaces. We need to have spaces for women.
Mhm.
And the issue always is that traditionally, a space for women is going to come about sort of naturally, quasi naturally, inside the protection of the home. But instead, what happens is we go, oh, there's going to be like a men's prayer meeting down at the church. Then we should also have like a women's prayer meeting down at the church. And the reason for the women's prayer meeting is typically, well, we want to have this thing, but we don't want to have any way for men to go there. Because if the women want to be alone, we have to make it like a women's only space, which means we have to actively like keep men out. And these kind of spaces then prevent any interest from the spouses in trying to cultivate good things happening there.
Mhm.
So you can very easily end up in a self-destructive circle where the women are there and without solid direction, they maybe devolve into gossip or talking about each other's husbands, which is just the worst. And this is kind of like the therapy thing.
Mhm.
You're just talking, and without some direction, the tendency is for things to get negative, for things to get, unhelpful. And women get dissatisfied with their husbands, either from hearing how good other women's husbands are, or just because, other women are going to be, yeah, your husband is, garbage or something.
Yeah, you gotta divorce them right now because they didn't quite clean a dish perfectly before they put it in the sink.
Yeah. And the reality is that the reason for men's spaces exists because men are stronger vessels. Any way you slice it, they have more capacity for stress, more capacity to deal with difficult things. And if you are going home and you need support and you're going to unload all of that onto your wife, she is going to crack. It's going to be just too much for her. So you have to share that with other men who have
Mhm.
the ability to help you, to encourage you and guide you. That's the point of the men's space. But the women's space doesn't make sense because the women should be able to unload all those things on their husband because that's the whole point. He's supposed to be able to handle those things.
Yeah, so it's in the sense that women should be able to punch up, in that bring their uh, like lower capacity for stress and all of their problems onto something that is higher. But if you do it the other way, and it's like with sparring, right? To where if somebody is weaker, it's really easy for me as the really strong sparrer to keep up with them and match their pace, and they can work at their max capacity, and I can go down to their level and match that. Whereas for me, if I wanted to spar, I couldn't spar with my wife. Like it would just not work out well.
Yeah.
Whereas I can spar with you and gain like a pretty good amount of value. Um, which this just doesn't doesn't work the other way. So it is in that you know what you were saying of just value for men's spaces and actual um, ideas to where this can actually be a value add versus women's spaces, which never really existed outside of those spontaneous things within the home, which just goes back into if this thing happens for men, it also has to happen for women.
Yeah. And so we this was something that was brought up actually by my father. He said, which guy is the worst guy? The guy who goes to work 10 hours, works hard shift, brings home good money, and then gets home, changes, and immediately goes down to the bar and like hangs out with his bar buddies and then comes home. Is this guy worse than the guy who is a politician, who spends a lot of time with his family?
Yeah.
um we have this conception in our minds that like, oh well, the reason that this guy spends all this time at the bar is bad is because the woman just doesn't get any equal things.
Hmm.
And so people oftentimes think of the two income home.
Mhm.
It's unfair that the guy does this or the guy does that. No, what's unfair is that the woman has to do any of the things that the guy does.
Yeah, yeah.
And the same in this kind of analogy where it's like, yeah, he's going and doing this thing, which is not what I would consider best or optimal, but he's providing for his family, doing the thing he's supposed to do. And then he is de stressing with these other people rather than unloading that on his wife. And people will be like, oh, he's a bad guy for that.
Yeah, because I mean, this is the thing is that, if you're metaphorically or literally going to war and, you're doing a whole bunch of gruesome things to protect you and yours, and then are you going to tell all of your innocent little family every single gruesome
Yeah.
detail about, I had this guy in this one situation and, he was begging for mercy, but, for this reason or that reason, I had to, scalp him or something.
Yeah. I mean, you can take kind of the example of like Audie Murphy, which, you know, under the conception that everything's real that we hear,
Hmm.
Audie Murphy's a okay example of this in that, goes to war, just horrible, horrible thing, wins a Medal of Honor, is like war hero and all this, but just has terrible PTSD and goes home. Um, and like his wife ended up having built for him basically a kind of a soundproof area in their garage. So then when he's waking up with night terrors,
Hmm.
he can just go out there, or like weeks when it's really bad, he just sleeps in his little soundproof room.
Hmm.
So he doesn't have to disturb anyone.
Hmm.
And like nowadays, like, oh, how brutal, like how terrible. She should have been there. It's like, no, this was her being there for him. Is like,
Hmm.
well, when you wake up in the night screaming all these horrible things, like that's scary for me and everybody else. So like
Yeah.
the separation is good. Better if he can have other men to talk to, but it's like you don't bring that home to your family.
Yeah, because
So
this is a big thing is with the idea of PTSD to where in the wars where PTSD kind of became a much more of a thing, it was just in culture, as I'm told. I wasn't there. I'm just a sensitive young man. Was the idea that, the guys come back from war. I don't remember what war it was. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. Is that nobody wanted to talk about the war stuff. Everybody wanted to just ignore it and pretend that it didn't existed. So then all of the soldiers coming back don't have any spaces to talk about these things, and so they just have to mull on these thoughts alone, completely in isolation. And so that's where what we were talking about a couple episodes ago is just the idea of isolation kills. And so if you don't have that proper outlet in the same way that uh, you know, having a physical violence simulated. Might call it sparring, something. A lot of men would really like that. If you don't have that as an outlet, then it might not necessarily manifest in, you hitting your children or something, or hitting your wife. But there's going to be that little bit of like frustration that you can't really get out. And that's the same thing for also the emotional and spiritual camaraderie of being with men. And that's also just why ultimately it's just about when you enter Babylon, you enter the world. There's all of these horrible things that are happening, things that just don't need to be known by your family. And then when you get into your home, you should just leave that at the door. In the same way that when you carry the negative emotions from the outside world, even if you have a dog or something, they're going to pick up on those emotions. They're going to pick up on that, and they might be a little bit more timid, a little bit more scared because they can read that energy off of you. Whereas it's ultimately your responsibility to, however you can, just not carry those really heavy baggage and heavy emotions into the home. And instead, either if you don't have those and you can just deal with those and not have those manifest, perfectly fine. Or when you do have those, have other strong guys that you can sort of just bounce off of.
so going back and applying this to kind of the concept of like, oh, you're looking for a wife in terms of the masculine feminine trait thing, it's important then to not be looking for someone as a man anyway, looking for a wife that is going to be able to hear all your concerns, that is going to be able to, help you with all these things. That's just not what you should be trying to get out of a wife. That's not something you should be looking for in her, because that is going to be one of those things. If you do find some woman who's so masculine that she can handle more than you can, she's probably not interested in you if you are masculine at all. Um, and you are not going to enjoy necessarily the other aspects of that relationship because it's not going to be so much. There's only room for so much masculinity and so much femininity, and you need a balance of both. You need 100% of feminine and 100% of masculine. So if you're like 98% masculine, don't be expecting that you're going to find some woman who's like, oh yeah, she can handle all these things that you have. No, because you are able to handle more. So when you're looking for that, you should be instead going, okay, I'm not looking for a best friend, which so many people are like, oh, I married my best friend.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm not going to hate on people who are like, oh, I ended up marrying my best friend. Like, okay, but that definitely should not be a goal where like you're just like, oh, she's my drinking buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. You need to have both. The friendship role and the wife role are separate. Mixing them degrades both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're setting yourself up for disappointment, frustration when later on you may have to admit, I have to go talk with my friends about something, and no, honey, wifey, I actually don't want you there because you can't handle the things. When I talk about these things with you, it doesn't work out very well. Well, now it's like you're ending your best friendship. And since your marriage was about being best friends, it's like now the marriage is in jeopardy. Whereas when you have that separation of like, you are the love of my life, the one I die for, and here's all the things that you do for me and I do for you, and we're this specific relationship, and then also I have to be supported by these other people over here, then it's not a threat to the relationship when I say, I need to go talk to this person about this thing. I need to get some advice. Um, it's okay to get advice from your wife. It is. But she should not be frustrated, offended, or distraught when you get it somewhere else, because that shouldn't be a foundational pillar of the relationship of like, oh, I'm always the one he goes to for advice. If that's the case, you're probably not looking at a very honest relationship, if I had to guess. But I'm not here to tell people they need to break up or like, oh, get out of a relationship. This is all in the pre aspect. If you have not entered a relationship yet, these are things to consider because you want to get to a point where you're very strong and you have a strong relationship with your wife that's not built on some other type of relationship.
Yeah, which really just comes into there are roles that you will play in everybody else's life and roles that everybody else will play within your life. Where it's, the concept is a common thing that's talked about with like a head coach for a esports team or something, is that the head coach shouldn't really be best friends with all of the players,
Right.
because there needs to be that separation in a relationship to where you as the head coach, you're wearing the suit, and even if you do go out with the team, you're at a separate table talking with the owners or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the players get to do the player rowdy thing, but then here is just the you are in the same way that when you're friends and you're working in the same company, it can be a little bit cool or a little bit funny to just say, ah, I went on a bender last night and I'm just really not feeling it, and I'm just gonna not do any work, and then I'm gonna clock out early.
Right.
And that's one thing as a haha funny moment when it's your friend, but then when all of a sudden you're their boss, it's like, oh, this is just so you're going to get the same amount of money that we all do, and we're all going to have to carry the slack for you. Like, that is just not okay in a relationship. So understanding and having clearly defined roles that you take, to where you treat me differently than you treat your wife, differently than you treat your kids, differently than you treat any other member of like a family here, of being very clear in what the relationship is and what can be expected from you and what you expect from them. And everybody, it's also much easier to operate under that system because when there are clearly defined expectations, it's so much easier to lead. In the same way that we talked about the idea of a sailor with no direction has no favorable winds.
Mm-hmm.
In a relationship, when there aren't clearly defined goals, then there's going to be no way for people to know what is good or what is bad. And then at that point, it'll ultimately just come down to primal emotions or feelings, which are going to be fleeting, not concrete, and it will just inevitably lead to failure in the relationships.
Yeah, one of the things that I ask a lot of young guys is, what's the basis of marriage? And way too many will say love.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, well, love's really important. The action of love, not the emotion. The action is important. but the basis of marriage is actually the same as any other relationship, which is duty.
Mhm.
It's just that your duty to your wife is so much different than your duty to anyone else.
Mhm.
But every relationship has to be founded on duty. If you're a Christian, reading the Bible, you give very clear principles about how you're supposed to treat people based on their relationship to you. You're told how to treat your neighbors. You're told how to treat your family, your mother, your father. You're told specifically how to treat your wife. And so understanding that these are wise concepts that have founded civilizations. Each relationship has a different set of duties. And it's really important to get that squared away.
Mhm.
Because then later on, if it's like, oh, my husband's not behaving loving towards me, well, then I guess it's time for a divorce because the marriage was based on love and he's not even behaving in a loving manner, let alone feeling or having the emotion of love. So then what's left? Nothing, because that was the
Yeah.
basis. That was the
Yeah.
foundation.
Mhm.
But if the foundation is duty, it's, oh, he's not doing his duty. Well, then let's correct that. Let's get on the duty
It's
aspect of it.
very clear what the goals are and what actually needs to be
Mhm.
done, and then so it can be easier for everybody to help correct that.
Yeah.
And then going back into the concept of everybody's going to say that love is the most important thing in a marriage. Going back to media, that is just something that was more recently brought up in media in all of these stories, to where it is about the passions, which is something that is common in Disney movies forever. You have um, Beauty and the Beast as an example of just like, ah, I'm gonna go. I'm a peasant girl, and I'm going to go with this just monster who hates me. But there's that kind of like fiery passion of the minotaur milking going on,
Ah!
as opposed to Gaston, who's in a similar role. They're both peasants. Like Gaston is just a peasant,
Yeah.
and he is like leader of the community. Not trying to say that Gaston is the perfect guy, but
But he was a guy.
yeah. He wasn't a prince. He was very much a man of the people, a man of the people.
Yeah. So, like in communist terms, he was definitely the right choice.
Yeah. Um, and he's just like, here, why are you trying to sort of usurp your roles and live by your passions?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
And so this is just going into the understanding is that when you see all of these ways that media influences people and how these things constantly have to be reinforced over and over and over again, you just understand that kind of the purpose of this is to break away families and create strife that we do see de facto in the world. There is incredible amounts of influence of what people think relationships have to be from these sources, and relationships are worse than they've ever been across the board. And it's not about economy, it's not about money, it's not about this policy or that policy. It is primarily culture and expectations that people are given. And so that is just something that you have to be aware of and just reject.
I think you hit the nail right on the head. You say it's the culture promotes divorce. The culture promotes probably the highest risk behavior ever.
Mm-hmm.
One of the aspects about divorce that's different now compared to 100 years ago is the risk factor.
Mm-hmm.
We have mitigated the risk to where it's so low, especially for women who are the primary initiators of divorce. They're mostly women. It's so low risk for them to go for a divorce. And the thought process is that you should always risk on the chance of getting your happily ever after instead of accepting or settling for something that you deserve. You can look at the story of Cinderella.
Mm-hmm.
She was not royalty,
Mm-hmm.
which, I'm a big classist. I believe in classes.
Mm-hmm.
Peasant shouldn't marry royalty.
Mm-hmm.
But she gets this chance to go to the ball at the expense of basically, at least in the original version, her stepmother and stepsisters get their feet cut off and their heads fed to the birds.
Okay. All
So
right.
that's
Yeah.
like a pretty big risk, so to speak. But she would rather do that, pursue her own like potential happily ever after, instead of like, oh, just leaving home and living in the woods with someone else. Like if she's abused that badly, she's not going to take the risk of leaving home to like go to any old situation.
Mhm.
She's only taking the risk if it's like, oh, but maybe there's a happily ever after,
Mhm.
which shows that things weren't that bad for Cinderella.
Mhm.
Clearly,
Yep.
I'm victim blaming a little bit here,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in like the colloquial sense. But it's like in the modern day, every woman has this Cinderella story in their head of, oh, but maybe there's a Prince Charming out there.
Mhm.
So I'm going to take that chance. My husband is whatever, so I'm going to divorce him and go and do this other thing. That's promoted because there's not a sense of duty. There's only a sense of passion, love. In this case, the I'm going to get my happily ever after by taking this risk.
Yeah, and where media is directly um, one-to-one causation that you can see is that divorce rates all around the world went up at the exact same time, around the late 50s, early 60s, something like that. And the only thing that was a shared thing between cultures, because this was before internet, there's not really a lot of a shared mono globo homo culture that exists. Uh, and the only thing that really existed was Hollywood movies that were all the same. And there were like 3 movies that were very popular in the age, one of them being American Divorce. That all of these movies were about the idea that, hey, divorce is a great thing. And even if you have just a little bit of a complaint, just a minor grievance that you have in your marriage, just get a divorce, have your fun, have your fling, maybe meet your Prince Charming. And even in these movies, you don't meet your Prince Charming, things fail for you, but your husband will still take you back, and then everything will go on just the same.
I was just going to say that because there's this movie called The Philadelphia Story.
Mm-hmm.
The premise for the movie is this guy who's like a really high roller marries this chick, and then things don't go well. They get a divorce, and then in a couple of years, she's marrying another guy. But she like took a bunch of his money, and now she's in the high roller society, and she's made the tabloids several times.
Mm-hmm.
So the plot of the movie is a newspaper's like, "Hey, husband, old husband, like get us the scoop, so we can get our reporters in there to do the scoop on this tabloid-esque wedding,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll pay you a bunch of money." And so he does this thing, but of course, what ends up happening is they find out as well, the guy's not that great that she's marrying, and her husband really cares for her, and so they get back together like on the wedding day, right? Instead
Mm-hmm.
of marrying that guy, she
Yep.
remarries her previous husband.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole kind of thing is exactly that, where like, oh, her life has been bad ever since she divorced. So it kind of gives you this thought, like, well, if you divorce, even if you're on the brink of marrying another guy,
Mm-hmm.
if you decide not to, your husband will always take you back. Like that's
Yeah.
the messaging.
Yeah, yeah, and this is a thing that I was talking about and reading about a lot recently. Is just the idea of uh, within marriage, within weddings, there are certain things that have some type of basis, biblical basis, something akin to that, that is actually concrete. And then there are a whole bunch of things that I'm not quite sure if they are important or not. And I haven't really looked into it, looked into every single detail about the origins of something. But the idea of, let's say, wedding rings, I have no idea what the basis is for why we wear wedding rings. Wedding rings weren't worn for the longest time, and for all I know, it's some secret, Moloch sacrifice ritual
Right.
that is going on. And in this idea, a common thing that's talked about in media and brought up there is the idea of, the officiator of the wedding saying, "If anybody has any objections, speak now or forever hold your peace." And then it's the "I object"
Mm-hmm.
of the Prince Charming coming in at the last second in the
You
wedding.
mean Shrek?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Being Shrek coming in and swooning and saving the day for the girl,
Yeah.
which even the idea of saying that is the idea of everything is agreed upon. Everybody agrees that this is going to be the thing that happens, and then you're still leaving that one little idea of, oh, maybe somebody is totally within their right to break this up at this point.
Maybe someone's waiting in the wings.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of giving that idea of, a lot of women are probably thinking, hey, that guy that turned me into an alpha widow, maybe he'll show up and say I object.
Yeah, the number of people that I personally know, who obviously I'm not gonna name, even to you,
Mhm.
who basically alpha widow type, and then they're like, I'm gonna go marry this other guy, and like the whole relationship, they're basically just like, see this alpha guy, like
Mhm.
come save me anytime,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
they're married. Next thing they know,
Yep.
it's like they're fine.
Mhm.
find marriages. I'm not even saying that like, oh, this is a like they're in a horrible spot because of this. It's just a psychology that exists that's promoted basically that
Mhm.
like, oh, well, like there's always maybe that guy will come and rescue me at any point here, even though I'm like actively in a relationship committed to this other guy.
Yeah, which is the whole concept is that, in a lot of frustrated male spaces, talk about the idea of, hypergamy of women always
Right.
constantly trying to play the step pyramid, whereas uh, for pretty much every negative trait, it is in the concept of these are just the primal urges, and these aren't things that have to exist. And within particular structures, within particular understandings, they no longer become a thing that's thought of at all. To where when there is a structure and understanding that there is a duty behind this, and once you are locked into a situation where you have a certain responsibility, there is no abdicating that duty because that duty is the most important thing. Then there's never going to be this idea of being tempted by the, Claudio von Julio von Compenstomp
Yeah.
coming in.
We just say Harley McBadboy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is also half Minotaur.
Is also happening every time,
Yeah.
every time. Like one of the positive manifestations of kind of the hypergamy thing is that uh, men are not necessarily always logical, but men tend to be fairly logical, and they're oftentimes able to kind of be like, okay, I'm a 6, 7, 8. I'm going to shoot for a 6, 7, 8, respectively, and then women have this psychology about them where no matter where they would even rate themselves, they're always going to try for the top guy. And this is actually a really good thing. I'm going to explain why. Women always want a top 5 to 1% guy in anything that they're looking at. But each woman is able to live in a fantasy world. And these two things come together in like a perfect way. And what I mean by that is each woman can decide on their own, basically, or with minimal suggestion, what traits are the most important or what skills are the most important. And they're looking for a guy who's top 1% in that specific thing. So if you go back to before the global homo unification of the world, pre 1950s, people were born, lived, died within 100, 200 miles of where they were born. That
Hmm.
just made sense. Why would you go other places?
Hmm.
And even some of the earliest media, like State Fair, is about like, oh, she's 1 in a million because she found a journalist at the State Fair and then she moved to Chicago to whatever with him, right? Like, wow, that's crazy. Yeah, even then they accepted that this was insane. And so you look at that and you go, okay, well, you got a town of, 5 to 8,000 people. Realistically, you got a couple hundred marriageable couples, marriageable women, a couple hundred marriageable guys at any given time, um, that you're going to be able to know. And what you're trying to do as a woman is sort out which guy is going to make you happy. But it's actually the reverse. What you're trying to do is justify being happy with whichever guy you get. It's a
Hmm.
subconscious thing that happens with women, and it's very much for their benefit. It enables them to be very happy in relationships where the guy is not the best across the board. And so the way this works is you can decide, oh, I want a guy who's top 1%. So then when you find a guy, it's like women are looking for where he's a top 1%er. So it's like, oh, well, he's dairy farmer. He's one
Hmm.
of the best dairy farmers. Perfect.
Yep.
Oh, he's a chicken farmer. One of the best chicken farmers. Perfect. He runs the hardware store. It's like the best hardware store in town.
Hmm.
This guy is a top 1%er. It's all these different areas where guys can be top 1%ers. And when you don't have a national global homo society, it's so easy for all 200 to 400 guys to be top 1%ers in 200 different disciplines.
Hmm.
And so then the woman doesn't have to actually look to a global scale when you don't have to compare your man to the millions of men out there who are doing tons of different things. It's wild. If you look at skiing, for instance, in the 1950s and 60s, to find like a really good skier in your community would be super simple. And without the knowledge of people existing in France or Belgium
Hmm.
or Germany, Austria, who have been skiing their whole lives since they were little children, you don't have to compare it to that. You can simply look at the 10 guys who are skiing and the one guy who's really fast or has a lot of control. You can just be like, whoa, this
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
is really great. And then likewise, you can go to the state fair and the guy who's got the biggest pig, you can just be like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
that guy is awesome. I like that
Mm-hmm.
guy. And you don't have to compete. And so this enables women to be very, very happy with the men that they have. And the problem is when you have the whole world to compare everything against. Now, no one in your community, none of the men that you are looking for can be top one percenters
Mm-hmm.
because you can just flip open your phone and find 30 guys who are better.
Yeah. Like I did gymnastics for a little bit, and I can pretty comfortable doing something like a backflip. It looks pretty clean, and in a world to where nobody else can really do a backflip that you're going to see. It's like oh wow, that would be a really impressive physical trait. And then you scroll through YouTube Shorts, Reels, TikToks, or something, and you see
Yeah.
somebody doing a double backflip on land, which is absolutely insane, just on grass. And then it's like oh, all of a sudden, like this person is bottom 1% now. Whereas it's all about that sort of perception, and that's how also just social media, just one of the most like poisonous
Yeah.
things, especially more so to women.
Yes.
Those kind of like spell casting and invocations are way more damaging because of how it sort of leads expectations. But to what you say in the idea of how you apply this as a guy is that you want to try to find some kind of trait to where you can be the most reliable person in your community for this particular thing, in both in terms of finding a potential marriage suitor to where you can be, all right, this is where I am the best, and your wife can say, my guy is the best shill shocker or whatever, making up a task, whatever, doesn't
Shill
matter,
shocker. Love it.
shill shocker, because there are people that are shills, and I shock them. So with this is that it's both valuable for marriage, but then also valuable to, you always want to be the guy of, I know a guy that does this, I know a guy that does that, and that expands your social circle with other men, and that also expands your social circle with women as well, because these things are co-synergistic with each other, in that the things that are everything that is going to be the important things for you to do within your role in society at any one particular point is going to be broadly applicable to essentially everything. So the same things that are going to help you with women are the same things that are going to help you with guys. And then, you have a guy that always relies on you to do this one thing, maybe as a sister, and then all of a sudden it's just easy, really uh, able to have that as something that can sort of expand your social circle. And then also within that, it creates um, connections that are more valuable because it's not you endlessly wading through the sea to where, another concept in general that we're talking about is the idea that marriage isn't between a man and a woman. Conception that I have doesn't matter. Like necessarily its whole validity is that marriage is not between a man and a woman. Marriage is between one family and another. All of your people and all of these people, they're going to be interacting. They're going to be having Thanksgiving with each other. And it's far too common to see nowadays that, maybe you have a good relationship with your wife and, you like your wife, but then you hate every single other person that associates with them and associates with their family, which is a cause that happens to where there's all of these unnatural dating schemes of not dating within the community and instead opening yourself up to the entire world to where there are those unlimited options, which also means that there's not going to be as much vetting in the other important aspects of building a proper uh, family unity.
Yeah. In addition to that, you kind of understand that when you are marrying, there's a larger concept of what's going on, and that is you're building a community. You're drawing two families together. That's going to make your community stronger. That should be your kind of goal anyway. So, again, when you are vetting for a future wife, when you're trying to enter these circles, you need to keep in mind a lot of different things. And if you want to have an impact, if you want to have high technology beliefs, and if you want to, actually make a difference, you have to go beyond just kind of your own desires in the moment. You have to look deeper than that. I'm not saying people need to like constantly be fighting themselves, but you should be having an idea before you get in a relationship of what you want it to look like and kind of sticking to those guns and not getting bowled over making a lot of capitulations on how you believe things should be early on just leads to stress later. Because if you believed these things when you were not in a relationship and you were of a quote unquote sober mind, then when you are really in deep, so to speak, and you have all these emotions going on, you may feel like, okay, I can live giving up this one thing as long as then I get married or then I have this girl or whatever.
Mhm.
But you actually probably can't. Long term, you're going to have to do something because those things made sense to you and they're going to keep making sense to you.
Mhm. Yeah, and this just goes back into something that's talked about many episodes, many times. Just ultimately, everything is better when there's an honesty attached to it,
Mm-hmm.
to where you're not lying to yourself, to where you're not lying to others, and just having a strong idea that being steadfast in, I believe that things should be this way, and I'm going to do my best to make sure that things are this way. When you take uh, compromises that just shouldn't be there, that aren't needed to be made there, that are only there because you are afraid of the conflict, then that's just going to lead into situations to where uh, essentially everything goes into chaos because order is a very specific thing. There's only one way that headphones can be untangled, but there's infinite ways that headphones can be tangled. So, in order to create order, you need to have a strong conviction that these headphones go this specific way. Otherwise, they're going to get tangled.
Yeah, and the last thing you want is tangled headphones. I don't get that one. I don't use like headphones, but I'm going to assume that that's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I live in a rural place where headphones aren't invented or something. That's the most shoehorny it's ever been.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, definitely in that sense, if your idea is, oh, I'm really agreeable, I don't have any strong convictions about this thing or everything, I can get along with anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, no, you're just going to be part of the tangle,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. And now you're just chaos.
Yep.
So you're not any of the forms of, you know, order, which you can have order in different shapes and stuff, but they always have to be specific.
Mm-hmm.
They're never just, oh, whatever you want, and then it falls into a geometric shape. That just never
Yeah,
happens.
yeah, yeah.
So if you want to actually build a community, have impact, you have to be specific. You have to be convicted, and you have to hold to them. You can't just be like, well, if I just let everything around me go the way that it's going to go, and I just go with the flow, then I'll get to nirvana or something.
Yeah. So ultimately, just have a really big idea and strong convictions about what you want, and just be kind of clear that this is something that I'm looking for, and I'm not going to compromise on it. And it's so easy to have compromises in the idea of, oh, if I don't compromise, if I don't capitulate to, let's say, a father says, I'm not going to let you my daughter unless you do X. And if you say, well, no, I'm not going to do X, that doesn't always actually lead to the ultimatum being followed through on. Because also it's just the idea of the shit test, to where if you are going to be constantly capitulating, then that one is that you won't be a strong leader. So any good family or father in this situation would probably say that, okay, this isn't actually good for me because he's just trying to kiss ass to me all the time. But then also, if it is they are very headstrong in these things that to not be true, then it will just come in a situation of, hey, I don't want to be a part of this, or that I did my best, I put my best foot forward, and things didn't happen, so I will just take that as it will.
Yeah, I think being willing to stand by yourself is difficult enough without the added stress of like, oh, there's a marriage on the line. And this is another aspect of the culture that makes things very difficult is this may be foreign to a lot of people, just the idea of like a father being involved at all. But in the stronger familial circles, this is kind of a thing that exists. And obviously historically it's been very much the case. So if you're not even interested in meeting her family, then you didn't listen to anything we said for the past hour.
Mhm.
So then there's no real point in being like, oh, here's how you handle the father. But if you did, then just understand that this may not exist where you are, but it should and it will in the future.
Yeah,
So
and it's
you
also
should be shooting for this.
yeah, and also it's a concept is that if your uh, to be wife is completely disrespecting her father and not um, following under his headship, then why wouldn't she just do the exact same thing to you?
Yeah.
If she's lashing out against the authority figure that is responsible for her safety in one aspect, then obviously she's just going to do it in the next one.
Mhm.
And then when that happens, that was your responsibility to take care of. And in that sense, the person that's ultimately responsible is you.
Especially since you gave validity to the other thing. When you say, "Oh yeah, your parents are just horrible and you should just blah 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 blah," you're giving validity to that. It's a different thing to after you're married, be reflecting maybe on some things they say and say, "Yeah, well, your parents want us to run our house like this, but I want to do it this way." That's different because you're not challenging a loyalty. You're saying your loyalties are here now, and we're going to do it this way. Compared to a lot of the ways that guys will do this is take advantage of a girl by just exploiting the fact that she has some grievance with her parents and basically gaslighting her like, "Oh, that's not okay. You're being abused. You should come live with me for a while." Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just the worst way to steal a girl away, and you're priming her for that to be the solution if there's ever a marital trouble with you.
Yeah. So when you can, it's also in the idea that it's going to be really hard to find somebody who's like already perfect, or already checks all the boxes. For me, as an example, I'm really interested in a whole lot of health things, and while it would be, in some ways nice to already have somebody who's linen pilled, somebody who's already really aware of all of these concepts, there's also the angle of I have the ability to be the leadership in that, to where I can be the one who is giving all of the correct information on what are the best things are to do health wise. So in that sense, that is a strong tool that I can have to take this aspect, which is a soft red flag of she wears wireless headphones, which also doesn't exist in a rural area, so whatever. And then that can be something that turns into, oh, this could have been, a potentially big issue, to all of a sudden it's not going to be an issue at all, because I can take that and mold them in the idea of it always, you're never going to find the perfect woman who's already set up. And this also just goes into the whole idea of, like the trophy wife kind of thing of, I got to get every single thing in my life completed, and then finally at the end gain my trophy, gain my prize
Mm-hmm.
for all of this work. Whereas ultimately a marriage is about building up from the start, and it's just about having enough that is compatible, and to not have certain aspects that are unacceptable. So this is the idea of, there are soft red flags and there are very hard red flags, to where, for me, ideally, I would like a woman who has been in some type of physicality athletic venture, but it's not a really super super hard disqualifying red flag if all of these other factors are there. And this just applies to so many other things, to where just accept that all you need is a good starting point, a good plot of land, and then it's your responsibility to build the house up from there.
Yeah, and I think building is, the nature of man. We talked a little bit about, the boomers' complaint about men being lazy.
Mhm.
It's another one of those misdirected things. So much of what causes millennials, Gen Z, and Alpha to be really lazy is that there's nothing to go and conquer. Everything is kind of in a safe, controlled environment. And you're just told, hey, just get in your lane and go do your thing. Whereas even 50, 60 years ago, you could just go and like start a business and conquer stuff. And you had all this ability and agency.
Yeah,
Excuse
but
me.
there's no more space, and you can't do anything in any place. You can't go there. You can't do anything there. But you have to do something somewhere, but not here. And
And
everybody
not
else,
this.
yeah, 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 not here, not this. And then you try to go somewhere else, and it's not here, not this. And then you're just gonna get that verbatim over and
Yeah.
over and over again, which is of just it is only expected for people to shut down in that scenario, to where men want to conquer unowned space. And if there is no unowned space to conquer that you can actually make yours, then the only real solution is to give up.
Go into hibernation or something.
Yeah, in the same way that I can't meet somebody on the street and talk to them, say, hi, Mr. John Daylight Savings. I cannot talk to Mr. John Daylight Savings in the world and like give a little nudge maybe a little bit more than a nudge about what are you doing to me? Why are you destroying my life? So in that sense, the two solutions is either for me to go crazy or for me to just accept it, which that is the thing that young men have done these days, is to see that they can't talk to their John daylight savings time. They can't conquer any unowned space because there is no unowned space, and there is very little ability to do that. So just kind of shut off. And so in that sense, we are in a time where things are more difficult to do, but everything in life is worth doing that's hard. I'm never going to be the person who, in the same way that I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for obese people, it is understanding that, yeah, us young men, us sensitive 17-year-olds, even young 30-year-olds have a really rough go at it, really rough time. But it also goes back in what we were saying before, is that economics isn't the end all be all, and that the best things in life are free. The best things in life are things that can be done, and that they are purely cultural. And the cultural things are things that can be changed, the things that you can take ownership of, you can take responsibility for. And it's something that is always free, always an option for you to do. And it doesn't matter if the boomers own 80% of the housing market and the average age of the home buyer is 94 or something. So in that sense, there shouldn't be a, when there are things that you can't control, there are things that you can control. And going back into just having a direction, and that understanding that these are things that you can take responsibility for, and there is no scarcity with that. When it comes to a particular relationship or particular dynamic that you have with anybody, you can always just make that better and better and better, and no cost to it, and it will just overall make everything infinitely easier, and you'll have a stronger base, a stronger foundation to work off of in order to challenge everything else much more effectively. Because you, as a singular unit, a singular individual, you are at your weakest. You have so much less bargaining power, which is why you need to unionize. And uh, paint the town red with the proletariats or something. Metaphorically speaking.
In Minecraft? Question mark.
Not in Minecraft. It's just a vague idea of the proletariat being John daylight savings time, who you can't interact with.
I see. Yes.
See, there's no actual literal entity named that, John daylight savings. So just being able to create those strong communities gives you a better situation, a better scenario, to where one person might have one thing, but they're lacking in all these other things, and you can get together and be much stronger as a collective unit, which is exactly what Babylon and media have been trying to get people against, because people, individual, are weak, and everything has been going towards making people as individualistic as possible. And even the times where you do congregate with family of Thanksgiving, you have to talk to your, racist, Trump-loving uncle about how he's just the most evil person ever, and just get, Aunt Jemima to start crying at Thanksgiving. And that's just, the exact thing that it's perfectly free to not make Aunt Jemima cry. You don't have to make her have tears.
I agree. In that sense, it's important that you, as an individual, when you're an individual, be planning for what you're going to do when you're not an individual.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you build? What's the area to be conquered? In this day and age, the area to be conquered primarily is up here, because the mind virus and the spiritual assaults are so readily available to us at every turn. That's where the battlefield is. So, if you feel directionless, just know you can turn your attention there, and the battlefield there is always going on, and you can actually conquer. You can create places that are actually safe. You can actually create resistance zones, so to speak. And building your family in a intentional way is one of those things you can do that fights back, and it gives them just the absolute worst headache in the world when you just have like a family and you live meagerly and you don't send your wife to work even though you're poor. Like, that just makes the big baddies just like
Yeah, see, because you can just accept that, hey, we're just going to be a little bit more poor. So you don't have, your wife's coworkers telling you to divorce for just the most minor infractions possible. And so you can always just choose to take those sacrifices to do the thing that is right in the face of adversity and then build yourself up to where you can tank more adversity, which it's also just the cultural front, the mind virus that has been created is the biggest, most powerful weapon that is being utilized against us. Can talk all day long about, buying a house or 50-year mortgages or this thing or
Seed
that thing.
oils.
Seed oils, yeah, yeah. Whereas these things are weapons, but if the cultural impact was not there, then these things would be trivial to dispose of.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why the most important thing is to make sure that any idea of a real family is fake. And with that being said, it's been real.
It's been real.